Hey, what's up, Market Moose? Mike from the Moose on the Loose. I hope you had a great weekend today. This week, actually, we're going to talk about retirement the entire week for Canadians because I do have my webinar on Thursday about the 6 retirement upgrades. And the 6 retirement upgrades starts by answering 6 important questions. So, do you have enough to retire? How to pay less fees, because paying fees sucks, right? How to pay less taxes, because paying taxes sucks even more. How to spend more and still have enough to retire. What if the market crashes? How can you protect your portfolio from that? And how do I know you are doing the right things? Because your neighbors maybe do completely the opposite and both are going to work. So how can you grow that confidence in your retirement plan? So I'm going to answer all of those questions at retirementloop.ca/webinar. It's a webinar about 2 hours long, 1 hour presentation, 1 hour Q&A on Thursday, retirementloop.ca/webinar. Speaking of questions, we're going to talk about today what's the best at retirement, investing in dividend ETFs or in dividend stocks. As you know, I run Dividend Stocks Rocks. I'm a passionate investor. I love going into dividend stocks. I love to manage my portfolio this way, but from time to time, I will have actually DSR members and other investors say, yeah, Mike, but how about investing in ETFs instead? That follows something that is quite similar to your strategy. So dividend ETFs such as XEI or VDY or XDIV, XDIV versus holding dividend paying stocks and thinking about also the different impact on both types on non-registered account. So a lot of questions that I get from those investors who worried about maybe it's going to be a lot easier to manage an ETF or I'm going to be more diversified and I'm worried about making mistakes holding some stocks. So I thought of like doing a deep dive into this question. So first things first, both strategies work. If you want to invest in dividend ETFs, if you want to invest in dividend growth stocks, both of them will work, but under certain conditions. So we're going to take a look at what's good and what's bad for both sides. So if you go for the ETF, what I like about that strategy is, well, it's professionally managed. So you don't need to take too much time about building the portfolio. The ETF is there for you. It's made by portfolio managers. You don't have to worry about it. The other thing is great. You don't need too much time, knowledge, or interest to buy a dividend ETF on the stock market. A small research, you can even ask ChatGPT to compare all of them. The best way to do it is just to compare the fees, compare the strategies, and then look at the top 10, 25 holdings to see which one suits best your interests. And then you're good to go. You buy it. You don't even have to worry about it going forward. If you decide to go for dividend paying stocks, the main advantages is, of course, more control and more understanding. One thing I really don't like about investing in ETFs is if the ETF goes up or goes down, I have no clue why. If the stock goes up or goes down, I know why, because I monitor the earnings, I understand what I have in my portfolio, I'm in full control. So I'm not surprised when interest rate rises, seeing my utility stocks going down, for example. It's totally normal. Of course, it requires more time, more knowledge, more interest. You can actually cover a good part of that if you register to a service such as Dividend Stocks Rock that will support you with research and tools to manage your portfolio. So you're going to save time, you're going to gain knowledge. But I mean, let's be honest, if you have no interest in managing your portfolio, do not go for stocks. Regardless if it's dividend stocks or not, it's just going to be very complicated if you don't care about learning a little bit. So in the non-registered account, the main difference is the ETF will be a distribution, not a dividend. So depending on the ETF, you may receive dividends, you may receive capital gains or return of capital, or all or a mix of all of this. So it's important that you go on the ETF website and you read about how the distribution is fragmented towards all those sources of income. If you invest in stocks, well, those are dividends. You get that Canadian tax credit if those are Canadian dividend stocks. And there you go. So probably a small advantage on one side, but it really depends on which type of ETF versus which type of stocks that you have. Because if you have several US stocks, not going to be subject to the tax credit as well. The other thing that I have to mention here is if you intend to live off your distributions or your dividend, well, keep in mind that some ETFs will have a variable distribution. So from one quarter or another, or from 1 month to another, the payment will be different. That creates some budget distortions. Of course, if you combine that with a cash reserve, you don't have to worry too much, but it's less stable and flat versus if you invest in stocks where you get your payment monthly or quarterly, but usually it's going to be about the same amount all the time, and then hopefully they're going to increase. So with the ETFs, it's not as clear and as transparent as this, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make less money. It's just that it's going to be more volatile. One other thing is if you look at an ETF like XDIV, sounds very interesting at retirement, right? The yield is about 4% and it's packed with great companies. The only problem is it's all about Canadian stocks. So if you select Royal Bank, Suncor, TD, Sun Life, Manlife, I mean, this is the top 5 right now of XDIV. I think A, you can do that on your own, and B, that's not much diversification, right? You have like 4 stocks out of your top 5 that are financial companies, and then 1 energy stock. I would aim for a little bit more diversification in my portfolio, but that's just me. Another question that I get often is, can I mix ETF and stocks at retirement? And I would say yes and no. Yes, if you go for a core ETF for a market such as the S&P 500 and you don't want to invest in US stocks, that's great. And then you can have a basket of Canadian companies or Canadian stocks that you can manage on your own. That is a good way to manage it. But if you invest in an ETF like XDIV, and then you add more Canadian stocks, chances are you're just going to add what you already have in the portfolio. So not too sure that it's going to be the best way to use your capital. You're going to do a lot of overlap on that part, and that is really something to consider. So what's the better choice between going for ETFs or going for Canadian stock for dividend stocks? I would say, again, both works. One thing that is really important to consider as you age is, will you continue to have the interest to manage a portfolio of stocks? And most importantly, how about your spouse? And I've covered this on the show a few months ago. The moment that I will feel that I cannot manage my portfolio anymore as I age, I'm going to think about my wife, who has absolutely no interest into doing so, and then I'm going to move towards ETF to keep it simple and yet professionally managed. So it's a great compromise. As long as I have my head clear, I will manage my portfolio. So it's really about time, knowledge, and interest. Of course, if you have the interest and you have a little bit of time, well, the knowledge can be learned from services such as DSR or from YouTube's or from podcasts. So it's not really a source of worries. It really starts with the interest of like, do I really want to manage my portfolio, or I just want to have something diversified and save on fees, and I don't want to read financial news? Because keep in mind, if you invest in ETFs, you give the control away, which is great if you don't want it, but then don't waste your time reading financial news because you won't have any control over that. If you wanted to make a combo between ETF and stocks, just make sure that you do not overlap a lot of overlap positions and go into thinking you're diversifying, but actually buying just more of the same. And maybe you're going to have like a huge exposure to a specific sector or a stock without even knowing. If you want to know more tricks about how to shape your portfolio and how to plan your retirement, I have the webinar on 6 retirement upgrades that will happen this Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Eastern Time. You can register for free at retirementloop.ca/webinar. That's retirementloop.ca/webinar. All right, Moose, that's enough for today. Tomorrow, we're going to tackle another very interesting topic. Are you able to sell shares at retirement without getting down to zero? Because a lot of people think if you sell shares, you're going to eventually erode your portfolio and go down to zero. So we're going to take a look at that tomorrow. And until then, don't forget to stay invested.